So this is the fourth and last segment of this Bread of Life gospel that we've been getting for a few weeks now. You might recall that at the first week there were 5,000 people who had been fed and then who kind of ran ahead of Jesus to get there because they wanted more food. And Jesus was trying to tell them, it's not about the food, everybody. You really need to be focusing on Jesus, on God, and not the food. It's not the result. It's not just good food, but the relationship. It's that matters. Then he's been going on the last 2 weeks trying to explain how he is the bread of life, using language that was very difficult for them to hear, because the words he was using talk about like gnawing on a bone, kind of like you do with ribs maybe, or got a tough piece of meat there that you're working on. And that's the kind of eating that he talks about his own flesh. And they're like, wow, this is just kind of crazy. How are we supposed to eat him? So that leaves us tonight, because this is the last part. And so what is their reaction? No thanks. We're out of here. So they leave. 5,000 leave. Now, that looks like failure to me. I'm sure if I came as pastor, and maybe even as Stephen Martyr, this would be true, and you had 5,000, and then you ended up with 12, you might get a call from the chancery, just warning you. You want to be careful when you're young, not to you get called in. The Archbishop said, how did you lose 5,000 parishioners? Well, I was just preaching one day, and they all left. They just all left. But it doesn't seem to bother Jesus. All that's left are 12. And he even asks them, are you going to leave? Does this bother you that much? Now, you and I might feel sorry for the crowd, because you know something they don't know. Because the Last Supper hadn't happened yet. And even the 12 are hanging on to Jesus, saying, he's led us right so far, so we're going to hang in there. But you know, and I know, the real gift that Jesus was giving. And so for us, hearing those words about eating his body and drinking his blood doesn't cause us to say, I'm out of here. I can't do it. But Jesus is most concerned that what they become, because they consume him, because they gnaw on him, that they become him. That's his goal. He's talking about spirit and life in today's gospel. He wants those followers of his to consume him so much that they become him. A radical change of who they are. And success for Jesus is not about the numbers. It's about the relationship. Are you Jesus? Have you been radically transformed? Now, some of you might have thought that the beginning of that gospel today was really about that Paul reading. This is too hard to hear about wives being subordinate to their husbands. And I go, oh my gosh, why? We seem to get that reading an awful lot in church. How come that comes around so often? Now we get it again. Well, let me tell you, what Paul is aiming at here is what Jesus was aiming at in the gospel, and that is that you become Jesus. The early church was known for being quite different from everybody else. You don't have to go very far in reading Roman history to realize that family life in Rome was not like family life today. And so what Christians did in how they lived their family life was radically different. So you can read like Seneca, and Seneca talks about, the men in Rome had all the rights and could order anybody else around, and wives were only for bearing children. They had other lovers for other things. Their wives were simply about taking care of the kids. Having a relationship with your wife didn't happen. That's what you had your lovers for, not for a relationship, just for children. Into that kind of world, Paul is trying to teach something different. Paul's trying to teach about a relationship where husbands and wives love each other. That's what he tells the husbands to do. You need to love your wife. What? I have to love my wife? Yeah. That's what this is about. He starts out by saying this is about being subordinate to each other. This is about a unity. When he describes the husband as a head, that doesn't mean he's in charge. It simply means that they go together. How would a head exist by itself without the body? Or how would a body exist without the head? Paul loves that imagery of the human body and the parts. But it's because they go together. Paul is not telling husbands here to order their wives around. That doesn't appear anywhere in there. Yeah, go for it, guys. Tell them what to do and how to do it. No. Their lives were radically different from everybody else. It's why people became Christians, because of how they lived and how they loved. They took care of each other. They took care of the poor. They lived love all the time. They became this mystery that Paul talks about. This is a mystery, how Christ and the church are one. It is mysterious. But that's the goal. That's what Jesus came to do. To unite himself with you here and then for eternity. But the reality, folks, is what we hear in that first reading, what Joshua is reminding the people of as they conquered the Canaan and moved into the land, is asking them, okay, you've seen everything. You saw how we came out of Egypt. You saw how we conquered the land. Realize who did this. This is God's doing. God does it. So Joshua says, so I'm going to follow him. What are you going to do? Because it's God's doing. It's God who transforms us. It's God who gives us that ability to love radically different than everybody else. It is God's gift that we have the Eucharist. It is all about what God does. You just have to be like the disciples and be there. Where are we going to go? Where else can we go? Here. You, Jesus, we know. You, God, we know. You will do it all.